The educational research vessel Galactic Inquiry hummed softly as it approached the third planet of an unremarkable yellow star. To most of the 14 students aboard, the small blue-green sphere looked deceptively peaceful. Through the observation dome, they watched Earth grow larger, its swirling clouds and vast oceans creating an impression of tranquility that couldn't have been more misleading. Professor Klarn Thrix adjusted his feathered crest, a sign of anticipation among his avian species, and tapped his talons against the lectern. The sharp clicking silenced the excited chatter of his interplanetary biology students. "Young scholars," he began, his voice carrying the gravelly tone common to the avian elders. "Today begins your practical education on planetary classification. The Galactic Academic Council requires experiential learning for a reason." He gestured toward the approaching planet with one wing arm. "Data and simulations can only teach so much. Some lessons must be felt." A crystalline student named ZYXDL raised a glittering appendage. "Professor, I've studied the planetary database extensively. Earth is classified as a Class 13 Deathworld, but the indigenous species lacks enhanced physical capabilities. Is this classification potentially outdated?" Professor Klarn's beak clicked in what the students recognized as his equivalent of a sardonic smile. "An excellent question that reveals precisely why we're here. By the end of this field trip, you'll understand exactly why Earth earned its classification. More importantly, you'll understand why humans have spread to 17 systems despite their apparent physical limitations." A gelatinous student in an anti-evaporation suit bubbled nervously. "But Professor, we've been inoculated against all known pathogens, correct? I've read that microbial threats alone—" "Yes, Blurpo," Klarn interrupted. "Medical has provided comprehensive protection. However," his voice dropped dramatically, "there are some things no inoculation can prepare you for." The ship's AI, Margot, chose this moment to project herself as a hologram near the professor. Her appearance, modeled after a multi-tentacled librarian species from Proxima Centauri 4, was deliberately designed to appear academically trustworthy. "Atmospheric entry in 90 seconds, she announced cheerfully. "I've taken the liberty of preparing terror management protocols and emergency extraction procedures for all student body types. Would anyone like to hear their personalized doom scenarios before landing?" "That won't be necessary, Margot," Professor Klarn said firmly. "Are you sure?" The AI's tentacles wiggled with what appeared to be disappointment. "I've developed 17 distinct catastrophic failure models based on each student's physiological vulnerabilities. Very educational." "Another time, perhaps," Klarn said, before turning back to his increasingly nervous students. "Now, who can tell me the primary geological feature that contributes to Earth's classification?" A serpentine student named Salic coiled confidently. "Active tectonic plates. Most habitable planets have settled into geological stability, but Earth's surface remains in constant, unpredictable motion. Over 90% of sapient species evolved on tectonically dormant worlds." "Correct," nodded Klarn. "And yet humans call major tectonic events natural disasters, as though nature has somehow made a mistake. This is your first clue to understanding Earth's unique psychological threats." The ship shuddered slightly as it entered the upper atmosphere, causing several students to reach for stability supports. "We will begin our expedition in what humans call the Amazon Basin," Klarn continued, unperturbed by the turbulence. "A relatively hospitable region by Earth standards." A mechanoid student with optical sensors arranged in a circular pattern emitted a skeptical whirring. "If that region is hospitable, I would be curious to learn what constitutes hostile terrain." Professor Klarn's beak clicked again. "Patience, X-17. If time allows, we'll observe a place called Australia. Though for safety reasons, we'll maintain orbital distance." As the ship descended through heavy cloud cover, the lush green canopy of the Amazon rainforest came into view. Several students gathered at the viewports, their various sensory organs absorbing the alien landscape. "Remember," Klarn called over his shoulder, This field trip is about experiential learning. Theoretical knowledge is valuable, but limited. Today, you will understand. Margot's hologram reappeared, her tentacles now arranged in what the AI handbook described as excessively helpful posture. Landing in 30 seconds. I've prepared a farewell message in case this is the last time we communicate. Would anyone like to hear it? Margot Killarn sighed. Fine, the AI replied, her tentacles drooping dramatically. But don't say I didn't warn you. When you're being digested by carnivorous flora. The vessel settled into a small clearing, its adaptive landing gear adjusting to the uneven terrain. Through the viewports, students could see massive trees stretching skyward, their canopies forming a dense green ceiling hundreds of feet above. Strange calls and chittering sounds penetrated the ship's hull. Prepare your environmental suits, Professor Killarn instructed. We'll disembark in 5 minutes. Remember your training, stay close, and most importantly, he paused for effect, try not to become an evolutionary cautionary tale. The students hurried to comply, each donning specialized equipment designed for their unique physiologies. As the ship's ramp extended toward the damp earth below, Professor Killarn took his position at the front of the group. Welcome, he said with unnerving cheerfulness, to your first lesson in practical Deathworld ecology. The students filed down the ramp behind their professor, their various appendages, tentacles, and pseudopods grasping scientific instruments. The air that greeted them was thick with humidity and rich with organic compounds. For beings accustomed to the carefully regulated atmospheres of interstellar academies and home worlds with significantly less biological activity, the sensory input was overwhelming. The first thing you'll notice, Killarn said as he activated his own atmospheric analysis tool, is the remarkable oxygen content. At approximately 21%, it's high enough to support combustion, but low enough to avoid spontaneous oxidation of organic matter. This balance is extraordinarily rare. The crystalline student, ZYXDL, had already begun to develop condensation on their outer facets. The humidity is intense, Professor. Indeed, Killarn nodded. Earth's hydrological cycle is among the most active in charted space. Water exists simultaneously in all 3 common states across the planet's surface. This creates weather patterns of shocking violence. He gestured toward the sky, where dark clouds were gathering. In fact, we may witness a precipitation event shortly. No sooner had he finished speaking than a rumble of thunder echoed through the forest canopy. Several students instinctively assumed defensive postures. Merely atmospheric electrical discharge, Killarn explained. Common here, though potentially fatal to several of your species. Stay close to the ship. The gelatinous student, Blurpo, was already beginning to ripple anxiously within their containment suit. Professor, my sensors are detecting thousands of microorganisms attempting to penetrate my outer membrane. Is this normal? Perfectly normal, Killarn replied. Earth's biomass is approximately 30% microbial. They're everywhere, constantly seeking new substrates to colonize. He reached down and scooped up a handful of soil, allowing it to filter through his talons. This single handful contains more microorganisms than the entire surface of Moonbase Alpha. The complexity of Earth's microbial ecosystems exceeds that of many planets' macroscopic life forms. A student with a gaseous body, contained within a pressurized transparent exosuit, drifted closer. Professor, I'm registering abnormal pressure readings. Is the ship's gravity compensator malfunctioning? Professor Killarn's expression shifted to one that his students had learned to dread, academic satisfaction combined with pedagogical mischief. An excellent observation, Vapori, he said. No malfunction. I've simply instructed Margot to gradually reduce the gravity compensation. What you're feeling now is approximately 0.2 G above standard. He tapped a control on his wrist device, and suddenly every student felt a dramatic increase in weight. Several immediately collapsed to the ground, while others struggled to maintain their form against the unexpected force. This, Kularin announced over the chorus of alarmed vocalizations, is Earth's natural gravitational pull, approximately 2.5 times stronger than the galactic academic standard. Every indigenous species on this planet has evolved under this constant pressure. The serpentine salic, flat against the ground, managed to hiss out a question. How do pumas function? Their musculoskeletal system evolved specifically for these conditions, Kularin explained, seemingly unaffected by the gravity himself after numerous visits. Their dense bone structure and powerful muscles, which appear so inefficient in standard gravity, are perfectly adapted to Earth conditions. X-17, the mechanoid student, had automatically adjusted their servos but was still processing the implications. The energy expenditure required for basic mobility is substantial. Precisely, Kularin exclaimed. Every life form on this planet exists in a constant state of resistance against crushing gravitational forces. It shapes everything, from cellular structures to behavioral patterns. ZYXDL's crystalline form had developed hairline fractures along several growth planes. Professor, I believe I'm experiencing structural integrity issues. Quite expected, Kularin nodded. Your species evolved in 0.3 G environments. Margot, please provide ZYXDL with a localized gravity buffer. A faint humming field surrounded the crystalline student, who visibly relaxed as the pressure decreased. The rest of you, Kularin continued, will adapt. This discomfort is educational. Gravity is the first and most constant challenge on a death world. It never relents, never tires, and shapes all evolutionary pathways. Thunder cracked directly overhead, and the forest canopy began to sway in strengthening winds. Large droplets of water began to fall, quickly intensifying into a downpour. Ah, perfect timing, Kularin said, extending his wings slightly to feel the rain. Now we can discuss Earth's weather extremes. This is merely a standard precipitation event, not even close to their hurricanes or tornadoes. Blurpo's gelatinous form was pulsating rapidly with stress. Professor, water is penetrating my containment layer. The droplets contain unknown compounds. Naturally, Kularin replied. Earth rain absorbs atmospheric particulates and various chemical compounds. Sometimes acidic, sometimes alkaline, always unpredictable. Another constant threat that shaped evolution here. The downpour intensified, creating a deafening roar as billions of droplets struck leaves, ground, and bewildered alien students. Visibility decreased dramatically. Consider, Kularin had to shout now, that Earth species consider this normal. From microscopic organisms to the largest megafauna, all have developed specialized adaptations for these conditions. A student with photosynthetic properties was hurriedly trying to cover their light-sensitive appendages. The electromagnetic radiation fluctuations are extraordinary. How do indigenous life forms regulate their energy absorption? They don't, Kularin called back. They adapt to inconsistent energy availability, feast and famine, light and darkness, wet and dry, constant extremes. Lightning struck a nearby tree with a deafening crack, sending splinters flying. The tree, over 100 feet tall, began to lean precariously toward the group. And here we observe another characteristic Earth phenomenon, Kularin remarked with academic detachment. Random, catastrophic, localized destruction. Margot, if you please. A shimmering force field extended from the ship, deflecting the massive tree as it crashed down. Several students emitted alarm signals in their native communication spectra. As you can see, Kularin continued as if nothing unusual had happened. Earth organisms must contend with not only constant environmental pressures, but also unpredictable catastrophic events. The statistical probability of sudden death is factored into all evolutionary strategies here. The rain began to slacken, and shafts of brilliant sunlight pierced the canopy, creating a dazzling interplay of light and water droplets. The rapid transition from darkness to intense light caused several students to activate protective measures. Note the radiation intensity, Clarn said, gesturing to the sunbeams. Earth's primary star emits significant ultraviolet radiation, and the planet's magnetic field offers only partial protection. Indigenous species have developed remarkable DNA repair mechanisms as a result. Vapori's gaseous form swirled anxiously within their containment suit. Professor, something small just attempted to penetrate my exosuit. It appeared to have a proboscis-like structure. Ah, Clarn's crest raised in enthusiasm. You've encountered one of Earth's most successful parasitic species, the mosquito. These tiny organisms specialize in bloodletting and disease transmission. He extended his wing arm, allowing one of the insects to land. This minuscule creature carries pathogens responsible for millions of deaths throughout human history. There are approximately 3,500 species of such blood-feeding organisms on this planet. ZYXDL, still protected by the gravity buffer, rotated several facets toward the professor. You're suggesting that microscopic parasites have shaped evolutionary development? Not suggesting, stating definitively, Clarn replied. The coevolution of hosts and parasites is one of Earth's most significant evolutionary drivers. Entire immune systems exist primarily to counter these threats. A student with a plant-like physiology suddenly recoiled, their vine-like appendages curling defensively. Something is attempting to colonize my surface tissues. Clarn moved quickly to examine the student. Fascinating. A local fungal species has already identified you as a potential substrate. Earth fungi can colonize almost any organic surface with remarkable speed. He quickly applied an antifungal spray from his field kit. Another constant threat here, microscopic colonizers seeking any viable host. Every Earth species exists in a perpetual state of defense against invasion at the cellular level. As the rainfall completely ceased, the temperature began to rise rapidly. Steam rose from the wet ground, creating a suffocating humidity that caused several students' environmental regulators to emit warning signals. Now observe the temperature fluctuation, Clarn said, checking his own environmental readings. We've gone from approximately 22 degrees Celsius during the rainfall to nearly 35 degrees in minutes. Such rapid changes are commonplace here. Blurpo, still struggling with their containment suit integrity, bubbled anxiously. Professor, how do Earth organisms maintain homeostasis under such conditions? Most don't. At least not as we understand it, Clarn explained. Many species here have developed remarkable tolerance ranges rather than precise homeostatic mechanisms. They don't maintain constant internal conditions. They endure fluctuations that would kill most galactic species. A strange buzzing sound began to grow around them, and several students noticed small flying insects beginning to gather. Ah, perfect, Clarn said. Another Earth phenomenon, opportunistic feeding swarms. These insects are attracted to carbon dioxide, heat signatures, and moisture, all of which we're currently emitting in abundance. The buzzing intensified as more insects arrived, creating cloud-like formations that began to descend toward the students. I believe, Clarn announced, glancing at his chronometer, this is an excellent moment to continue our tour from within the ship. We've experienced enough of the Amazon's hospitality for now. The students needed no further encouragement, moving as quickly as their various physiologies and the punishing gravity allowed back toward the vessel's ramp. Once inside, they collapsed in various postures of relief as the ship's systems began to restore standard conditions. A mere 32 minutes of exposure, Clarn noted as the ramp sealed behind them. In that brief time, each of you experienced at least 3 potentially lethal environmental factors. And this, students, was one of Earth's more hospitable regions. X-17's optical sensors rotated in what the others recognized as skepticism. Professor, surely there are more extreme environments on other planets. What makes Earth particularly worthy of its Deathworld classification? An excellent question, Clarn replied as he removed his field equipment. It's not that Earth's individual challenges are unique. Many planets have higher gravity, more aggressive parasites, or more extreme weather. What makes Earth extraordinary is the combination and constancy of these threats. He activated the main display screen, which showed a global map. This planet contains virtually every environmental extreme found throughout the galaxy, often within a few hundred kilometers of each other. Burning deserts transition to frozen mountains. Toxic swamps border fertile plains. Hurricane-ravaged coastlines lead to tornado-prone grasslands. Salic had recovered enough to raise their head. But Professor, environmental diversity exists elsewhere. What makes Earth's threats special? The pace of change, Clarn answered. Earth's climate can shift dramatically within hours, not the standard decades or centuries found on most worlds. Life here must be prepared for anything at any time. The evolutionary pressure is relentless and multidirectional. He expanded the display to show microscopic images. Furthermore, Earth's pathogens evolve at rates that defy standard biological models. Bacterial generations can occur in minutes. Viruses can mutate within days. Fungi can develop new colonization strategies within weeks. Blurpo was still attempting to repair their containment suit. It sounds as though nothing should survive here, let alone achieve sapience. And yet, Clarn said, switching the display to show human cities, the dominant species has not only survived but thrived. Which brings us to our next destination, a place where we can observe human behavior in its natural environment. The ship hummed to life, lifting off with a gentle vibration. As it rose above the rainforest canopy, the students gathered at viewports, watching the vast green expanse recede below. Our next observation will be conducted from a safe altitude, Clarn informed them. We're traveling to a region humans call Florida, a peninsula particularly known for extreme environmental conditions and even more extreme human behaviors. Vapori drifted closer to the professor. You mentioned human behavior as a factor in Earth's classification. How does sapient behavior contribute to planetary threat assessment? Clarn's beak clicked in that now familiar expression of academic amusement. That, young scholar, is precisely what you're about to discover. The ship accelerated, leaving the lush greenery of the Amazon behind and heading northward over the Caribbean Sea. From their altitude, students could observe the turquoise waters dotted with islands and the occasional weather formation swirling across the surface. Notice those spiral cloud formations, Clarn pointed out. Those are tropical cyclones, massive storm systems capable of destroying entire coastal settlements. Humans build their largest cities directly in the paths of these recurring phenomena. Surely they relocate after destructive events? Asked X-17. Rarely, Clarn replied. They rebuild in exactly the same locations, often with minimal modifications to their structures. Their response to repeated destruction seems to be stubborn persistence rather than logical adaptation. The ship's view screen showed historical images of hurricane damage, followed by reconstruction efforts in identical locations. This behavior pattern extends beyond natural disasters, Clarn continued. Humans build homes on active fault lines, at the bases of volcanoes, and in floodplains. When disaster strikes, they express surprise, then rebuild. ZYXDL's crystalline form reflected the light from the display in patterns that indicated confusion. This seems counterproductive to survival. Is this a species-wide cognitive defect? That was the Galactic Academic Council's initial assessment, Clarn nodded, until further study revealed something far more interesting. Humans don't merely tolerate risk. They appear to seek it out deliberately. The display shifted to show humans engaging in various activities, climbing sheer rock faces without safety equipment, diving into ocean depths, racing vehicles at dangerous speeds, and jumping from high places with only thin fabric canopies to slow their descent. These behaviors, Clarn explained, have no survival value. They provide no reproductive advantage, no resource acquisition benefit, and significantly increase mortality risk. And yet, humans engage in them voluntarily, often expending considerable resources for the privilege. The students observed in stunned silence as the display showed more examples of humans deliberately placing themselves in life-threatening situations for what appeared to be recreational purposes. Professor, Salek finally spoke. Are you suggesting that the dominant species of this death world actively seeks additional risk beyond their already dangerous environment? Precisely, Kularn confirmed. This behavioral trait appears to be unique among known sapient species. Where most evolved intelligence responds to environmental threats by maximizing safety, humans developed a psychological framework that incorporates risk-seeking as a cultural value. The ship began its descent toward the Florida Peninsula, maintaining an altitude that would keep them undetected by human monitoring systems. We're approaching our observation zone, Kularn announced. Florida represents a microcosm of Earth's contradictions, a hostile environment populated by risk-tolerant beings. The display zoomed in on the landscape below, showing a patchwork of urban development, swampland, and coastline. The environmental readings scrolled alongside the visual feed, indicating high humidity, elevated temperatures, and exceptional biodiversity. Florida contains over 50 species of venomous snakes, alligators capable of dismembering humans with a single bite, brain-eating amoebas in the freshwater, flesh-eating bacteria in the saltwater, and weather patterns that include both tornadoes and hurricanes, Kularn narrated. By any reasonable assessment, it should be classified as uninhabitable. Yet I observe extensive human settlement, noted X-17, whose visual sensors were analyzing the population density patterns. Indeed, Kularn confirmed, approximately 22 million humans choose to live in this environment. More remarkably, millions more visit temporarily for recreational purposes. The display shifted to a specific location where a human male was visible near a body of water. As the students watched in disbelief, the man approached a large alligator that was sunning itself on the shore. Standard procedure when encountering an apex predator, Kularn commented dryly, would be to maintain maximum distance. Observe the human response. To the students' collective horror, the man lunged at the alligator, grabbing it from behind and wrestling it into a submission hold. The creature thrashed violently, its powerful jaws snapping, but the human maintained his grip with apparent expertise. This phenomenon, Kularn explained as several students emitted distress signals, is known locally as Florida man, a subtype of human that exhibits particularly extreme risk-seeking behaviors, even by human standards. Blurpo's gelatinous form had contracted into a tight defensive ball. Is this some form of specialized profession? Ritual combat. Neither, Kularn replied. This appears to be spontaneous behavior, often performed without specific material gain or societal requirement. Sometimes it occurs after consumption of mind-altering substances, but frequently it happens with full cognitive awareness. The display shifted to show more examples. Humans capturing venomous snakes with their bare hands, deliberately approaching weather phenomena that could tear them apart, and swimming in waters clearly marked as dangerous. The Florida man phenomenon, Kularn continued, represents the most extreme expression of a species-wide trait. Humans don't merely survive their death world. They challenge it, test its limits, and deliberately engage with its most dangerous elements. Vapori's gaseous form had condensed into a tight, anxious cloud. This behavior pattern seems to contradict basic survival instincts. How did it evolve? That, Kularn said, is the question that has fascinated xenobiologists for generations. The leading theory suggests that human risk tolerance is an evolutionary adaptation to Earth's unpredictable threats. In an environment where danger can emerge without warning from any direction, freezing in fear or avoiding all risk would be maladaptive. He expanded the display to show humans in various environments across the planet. Instead, humans developed a psychological framework that incorporates risk assessment, risk mitigation, and, most uniquely, risk appreciation. They recognize danger, but they don't fear it in the way most species do. The students watched as humans ventured into deep caves, climbed ice-covered mountains, and dove into underwater caverns, all activities with high mortality potential and no obvious survival benefit. Is this behavior universal among humans? Asked Salick. It exists on a spectrum, Klarn explained. Some humans are more risk-averse, others more risk-seeking. But compared to any other known sapient species, even the most cautious humans display remarkable tolerance for danger. He gestured to new footage showing a human city devastated by an earthquake, with rescue workers digging through rubble. Note how humans respond to disasters, he said. While they experience fear and grief, they also display a psychological resilience that appears almost engineered. They process trauma, adapt to new threats, and continue forward with remarkable speed. X-17's processing lights blinked rapidly. You're suggesting that their psychological adaptation to constant threat is their primary evolutionary advantage? Precisely, Klarn confirmed. Physically, humans are unexceptional. They lack natural weapons, have no extraordinary sensory abilities, and their physical strength is unremarkable compared to many Earth species. Their advantage is entirely in how their brains process and respond to their environment. The display showed one final scene, a human standing on a platform high above a river connected to a cord. As the students watched, the human deliberately jumped from the platform, falling towards certain death before the cord stretched and rebounded, leaving them dangling safely. This activity is called bungee jumping, Klarn explained. Humans pay significant amounts of their resource tokens to experience the sensation of falling to their death, followed by last-moment salvation. They call this fun. A stunned silence fell over the observation deck. Finally, ZYXDL spoke. Professor, I believe I now understand Earth's Deathworld classification. Do you? Klarn asked, his tone suggesting the lesson wasn't quite complete. Yes, the crystalline student continued. It's not merely the individual threats, the gravity, weather, pathogens, or predators. It's the combination of all these factors creating an evolutionary pressure cooker that produced a species that doesn't just survive danger, it institutionalizes it. Well-reasoned, Klarn nodded. But there's one more factor you haven't considered. He switched the display to show human warfare throughout history, from ancient battles to modern conflicts. The images of deliberate, organized violence between members of the same species caused several students to activate their emotional dampening systems. Humans, Klarn said quietly, are the only known species that represents a greater threat to itself than its environment does. They've developed weapons capable of rendering their entire planet uninhabitable. They organize into competing groups that systematically attempt to eliminate each other. They create artificial dangers when natural ones aren't sufficient. Blurpo had recovered enough composure to ask, how has this not led to their extinction? Another uniquely human trait, Klarn replied. The same cognitive framework that allows them to face external threats also enables them to recognize the dangers they pose to themselves. They exist in a constant state of self-created existential risk balanced by self-restraint. He deactivated the display, allowing the students to process what they had witnessed. Earth is classified as a death world, Klarn summarized, not simply because of its hostile environment, but because it produced a species that internalized that hostility and weaponized it. Humans didn't merely adapt to their death world. They became an extension of it. The ship began to ascend, leaving the Florida Peninsula behind and climbing toward orbit. The blue-green sphere of Earth filled the viewports once more, its peaceful appearance now seeming like a cosmic deception to the shaken students. We've observed enough for one field trip, Klarn announced. Margot, please set course for the Academy. The AI's hologram materialized, her tentacles arranged in what the manual described as smug vindication. Did everyone enjoy their near-death experiences? She asked cheerfully. I counted 17 distinct moments when biological extinction was statistically probable. A new record for first-year field trips. Thank you, Margot, Klarn said with practiced patience. As the ship accelerated away from Earth, the professor moved among his students, checking their various physiological responses to the expedition. Most were still processing the implications of what they had witnessed. Their academic understanding of Deathworld classification fundamentally altered by direct observation. Before we conclude, Klarn said, addressing the group once more, I have a question. After your experience today, how many of you would choose to visit Earth again? Not a single appendage, tentacle, or sensory cluster was raised in affirmation. Interesting, Klarn noted. And yet humans leave their planet regularly, seeking new challenges and environments. When the Galactic Academic Council first contacted Earth, they expected a species desperate to escape their hostile world. Instead, they found beings who viewed the relatively peaceful conditions of other planets as boring. He activated a final display showing human colonies on other worlds. Humans don't terraform their new homes to eliminate environmental threats. They maintain certain dangers as features. They design their habitats to include what they call calculated risk factors. Salick had coiled into a contemplative spiral. Professor, are you suggesting that Deathworld adaptation is an evolutionary advantage for spacefaring species? The evidence supports that conclusion, Klarn confirmed. Of the 17 species that have independently developed interstellar travel, 12 evolved on worlds classified as hostile. The correlation is statistically significant. Vapori drifted thoughtfully. Because the psychological adaptations required for surviving a hostile environment, risk assessment, problem-solving under pressure, rapid adaptation to changing conditions, are the same traits needed for space exploration. Precisely, Klarn nodded. The Galactic Academic Council has revised its planetary development models accordingly. Deathworlds like Earth aren't evolutionary dead ends, as previously theorized. They're crucibles that forge particularly resilient forms of intelligence. He gestured toward the receding blue planet. Earth isn't merely a death world. It's what xenosociologists now call a cradle of madness. An environment so challenging that it produces species with psychological frameworks fundamentally different from those evolved in more benign conditions. The students absorbed this final insight as the ship engaged its faster-than-light drive. Earth vanished from view, replaced by the familiar streaking starlight of hyperspace travel. I had originally planned to extend our field trip to include a brief observation of Australia, Klarn mentioned casually. But given your reactions to Florida, I thought it might be excessive for a first exposure. The collective relief was palpable, expressed in various species-specific signals of gratitude. For your assignment, Klarn continued, I want each of you to analyze a specific aspect of human behavior in relation to Earth's environmental pressures. How does a species not merely survive a death world, but develop cultural practices that celebrate its dangers? As the students dispersed to their quarters to begin processing their observations, Professor Klarn remained in the observation dome, making notes on his teaching pad. Suggestion for next semester, he murmured as he typed, comparative field study between Earth and the acid plains of Vivian. Hypothesis, Earth will prove more psychologically traumatizing despite lower immediate mortality risk. He paused, considering the remarkable species they had just observed, beings who turned survival into an art form and danger into recreation. Beings who looked at the universe's most hostile environments and saw not threats, but challenges. Additional note, he added, expand section on psychological adaptation as evolutionary strategy. Key concept, perhaps the greatest adaptation is not physical resilience, but the ability to perceive danger as opportunity. With his notes complete, Klarn closed his teaching pad and gazed at the streaming starlight. Earth was classified as a death world for its environmental hazards, but its true defining feature was producing a species that laughed in the face of death, a psychological trait that might ultimately prove more valuable for cosmic survival than any physical adaptation. The professor's beak clicked in private amusement. The students had learned their lesson well, though not perhaps the one they had expected. They had gone to Earth to understand why it was called a death world, and instead discovered something far more significant: why its inhabitants might one day inherit the stars. Final note, Klarn whispered to himself. Most species fear the inhabitants of death worlds. Perhaps we should fear more those who think death worlds are fun.